everyone, Sandy Vail here at Homesteading Ways, and welcome to week 2 or episode 2 in our 3-week series of beginning a garden. Now, one of the first things you're going to need to look up is your hardiness zone, and I'll put a link down in the description box so it's easy for you to do that. You just have to put in your zip code and it will let you know what your hardiness zone is. And that's important because it will tell you when to start your seeds, whether that be indoors or outdoors, or if possibly that particular item you want to grow may not work in your area. So that is definitely something you need to do from the get-go. The next thing we're going to talk about is the different variety of seeds. Okay, so when you're looking at seeds, when you're ordering seeds or getting them from the store, there's a few things you're going to want to look for. You're going to want to look, and seed packets are very informational, so make sure you pay attention to them. On the back here, there will usually be some sort of a map that kind of lets you know when you can grow these outdoors, when you would put them out in the garden or start them outdoors. And it'll tell you the planting depth, the light requirements, and the water requirements as well. And then also when the plant will mature, when it will fruit. So make sure you read the back of all of your seed packets. But anyhow, some of the seeds that you're going to want to start indoors, especially if you live in a northern climate like me, is tomatoes and peppers and a lot of the melons. There are quite a few more that I could get into, but basically the warmer crops that need a little bit longer of a growing season. It would take too long, for instance, for me to plant tomato seeds outside in May, late May, early June, which is when they suggest, and think I'm going to get a decent crop, because I'm not. I'm going to have to start them indoors in order to get my tomatoes when I need them for eating in the summertime and for canning. So anyhow, make sure you pay attention to your seed packets. Also, there are some seeds that really should be planted directly outdoors, and a couple of those would be beans, whether they're bush or vining. Peas, definitely want to plant peas directly in the soil, and then stuff like radishes and carrots. But again, a good gardening book or your seed packets will let you know that. Okay, and another thing you need to take into consideration is how much light you have outdoors and how much space. Now, there's other ways of planting, you know, doing containers and using alternative methods, but you need to think a little bit ahead of time. For instance, if you're doing vining plants, those can take up a lot of room. There's a lot of sprawlers out there, and some of them I got here is pumpkin, squash. Pumpkin and squash are some of the biggest. But then again, so are gourds. A lot of gourd vines will take up a lot of room. A lot of your melons, because they vine. Cucumbers, like I said before, the peas. So you can do a lot of trellising for your vines if you are limited on space, or people just like to trellis because not only does it look nice, it also makes it easier to pick the fruit, and it also will keep it, you know, cleaner because it's off of the ground. But just look into it, see what space you have to work with and what items you have to work with. Now that some of those instructions are out of the way, let's get to planting. First things first, your soil. Now, I talked a little bit about soil in the last episode, and I have a good link in that video, so make sure to check it out. I'll put it up here in a card, and how you can make your own soil if you don't want to buy store-bought potting soil. But I bought the store-bought. So you put it in a bowl like this, and you get it wet ahead of time. Just get some water in there, and you know, just mix it in there. And you want to get it to a point where you can grab the soil, squeeze it, and it kind of holds its shape like that. You don't want it sopping wet, but you want to make sure there's moisture in there. So then you're going to go ahead and get whatever planting container you're going to use. If you're going to use all them little, like the cells, the 72 cells, the smaller ones, go ahead and get those, you know, here, let me show you real quick. here's a tray that they normally come in. Just get the whole tray set up and do it all at one time. But I'm only going to be planting a few right now, so I'm going to use a couple of these, and I think these are 3 or 4 inch pots, the cells here. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my soil in there, and I'm going to level it off. Tamp it down, because you really don't want too much air in there. Put a little more soil on top, and there you go. So then I'm going to take, you know, just a little, this is a skewer, poke a hole there, poke a hole here, and put my seed in. Now, right now, I'll be planting a couple of tomatoes, and I always plant 2 to a cell when they're bigger like this, because you just never know if one, or God forbid, both, are going to be duds. So you plant at least 2. If you're using smaller cells, then go ahead and just plant the 1. Put them down in that hole. Cover them with the soil. Now you want that hole, you know, about a ½ inch deep. Maybe a little less than that, but no more than an inch, I'd say. Get that in, and then start doing your other seed. Now I'm also going to be planting peppers. These are a sweet pepper from Bulgaria that I really like. I got them from the Seed Savers Exchange. I'll put a link. I hope they have them this year. These are seeds I have saved from last year. But they're bigger, almost like the size of a bell pepper, only they're shaped more differently. They kind of are more shaped like a hot pepper, but they're bigger in size, and they are very sweet, and they look really pretty when they're growing. And I'm going to do the same for the pepper plants as I did for the tomatoes. Hole there, hole here, and then get my seeds in there. Now, when the plants get a little bit bigger, if they both have taken off on you, they both have grown well, that is great. You can separate them. That's why I do try to plant them on opposite sides here, diagonal from each other, so that you have the best chance of the roots not tangling up together. And then you can keep both. Most of the time they will tell you just to get rid of one plant and save whichever one's bigger or stronger. And I get that if your seedlings are very close together. But if you get them when they're young and you take them out of the pot, you can get the roots apart and have 2 separate plants, and it'll turn out just fine. Now, a third thing I'm doing here, remember I talked about using recycled or upcycled materials? This is from a salad. So for this, I'm going to put it in here. I don't need a lot of soil, but what I need is surface. That's why I'm choosing this particular one. It's so wide, you know, here, because with this is another, there's several plants that you need to grow this way. And what it is, let me move this out of the way a little bit here. Hope you guys can see this. You're just going to tamp that down a little bit, because what I'm growing here is yarrow. And there are quite a few seeds, like yarrow, that need to be planted like on the top of the soil. They're very, very tiny seeds, and you know, just sprinkle them out, get them in your hand, sprinkle them out a little bit like that. But they need the light to germinate. A lot of seeds don't. And so they just need a little bit of warmth, and they'll come up on you. But some like this do need the light. So I'm just going to spread them out a little bit here with my finger, making sure to keep them on top. And there I have that. Next step is you're going to water these in. And that's where your spray bottle comes in handy. So you're just going to spray it, make sure it's nice and moist, right over the top here. And then the same with these. Now, when you're planting seeds that have to stay on the top of the soil, it is extremely important not to let them dry out. Being soggy is bad too, but drying out for seeds on top of the soil is like instant death if they've already germinated. So make sure to check these 2-3 times a day. One way you keep them moist is by putting a lid on them. This comes with its own lid, although I do have to poke holes in here for ventilation because your plants will need a little bit of air circulation. You don't want this turning out to get moldy or mildewy. But anyhow, that keeps the heat in, which most seeds need to germinate, and it also keeps the moisture in so that they don't dry out. I'm going to put these aside, and then with these, normally with these trays you have that plastic lid. Well, mine is gone, so I'm just setting them in here and then using a plastic wrap. Now if I had this whole thing filled, I would just use one giant piece of plastic wrap. But right now I only have the 2 here. So I'm just going to lay that across the top, and then I'm going to move it, and I'll show you where I'm moving it. Alright, so this is where I'm going to be putting my seeds. This is like one of those portable greenhouses. I have it set up facing a south-facing window. And I do have some tomatoes that I started a couple weeks ago that are up along with some herbs. But right now what I want to concentrate on is the ones I just planted that I want to show you. So underneath this tray would be where I'm going to put this heating mat, because the tomatoes and peppers in particular would really benefit from the heating mat. And you would leave that on just for a few days until they have germinated. And once they've germinated, you take the heat mat off and you would take the plastic off as well. You don't need a lid and you don't need plastic on anymore once they've germinated. And this is a supplemental light that I have. Now when I have more plants going, I will be adding more lights. You do not by any means have to have this. But I have several of them because over the years I got them on sale. And I would fill up my whole greenhouse with all the stuff that I wanted to put outside or sell as plants. So I do have more, and I don't have a good method of hanging them. I use zip ties, and then that way I can move them around, because with lights, you know, you're going to want to move them as the plants progress. So that's just something to think about if you happen to find any lights that are on sale or you have some along the way. It's easy to plug them into an extension cord, turn them on and off. The more light your plants get, the better. And I try to let these get about 16 hours of light a day. That doesn't always happen, believe me. But you can put these lights on a timer as well. So if, you know, the sun starts going away by you at 6 p.m., you could have the lights go on, stay on till, say, 10 p.m., and then turn back on 6 or 7 in the next morning, and your plants will get plenty of lights. But let's talk about transplanting. I meant fertilizing, not transplanting. Transplanting will be in the next video, guys. So right now, what I want to show you is these seeds that I've started a couple weeks ago. These are tomatoes, and this is chamomile. Now, as you can see, the chamomile, whoops, let me see if I can get this to you better. They're very, very, very tiny. Once they're grown, they'll be a whole lot bigger than that. But herbs, for the most part, do not like much fertilizer. They like a decent soil, but really they do better in almost too dry and kind of crappy soil. Let's put it out there. Crappier soil, herbs seem to love. And the chamomile is definitely in that group, so I will probably never fertilize it. I'm going to continue to make sure it stays nice and moist and the lid stays off of this thing, and I'm just going to keep getting it a lot of light until it's ready to plant outside. The tomatoes, on the other hand, I have a secret I do with tomatoes. The way I fertilize my tomato seedlings is with coffee. But let me back up a little bit. I don't fertilize any seedlings until they have their first set of true leaves. And with tomato plants in particular, if you can see, I don't know how well you guys can see, but right here is the beginning of their first set of true leaves. These will, you know, pretty much come off, but those center ones are the starts of their true leaves. And when I fertilize them, I just take a very little amount of coffee, liquid coffee. So if you made coffee this morning and you have a cup or so left, just hang on to it. You want to do coffee, I'd say 1 part coffee to 2 parts water. And then that is what I will water my tomatoes with. Not every day, I'd say every other day, but it works as a fabulous natural fertilizer. Okay, well that wraps up this week's episode of Beginning a Garden. I hope it helped you out. Please thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. If you learned something, that would be great. Let me know down in comments if this is going to be your first ever garden or if you've been gardening for years. I'd love to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe. That would be awesome of you if you did that. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And make sure to be back here next Tuesday for our 3rd and final installment on the Beginning a Garden video series. That's a mouthful now, isn't it? It was nice talking to you. And you take care.
Is that all right?